Hello, welcome to Legal Minutes. I have a very special show here with Frank Vitro. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
It's Vetro, but don't worry, everybody says it wrong.
Vetro. Okay. By the way, a quick trivia, Frank Vetro. I assume you're part Italian at least, as is Settembrino. So did you know that Italians were considered a minority at one point and were giving minority status?
I didn't know they were giving minority status, no.
Yes. Yes, they were. Brooklyn College, look it up. I also taught business law. I was an assistant professor there. So, and we have the amazing, the unparalleled, amazing attorney who is just an expert on all things in the criminal justice system and the process. We have Jeffrey Deskovic. And Jeffrey, I shouldn't have to even tell you who he is because everyone knows Jeffrey, but I did do a show and you can find it on YouTube, but he's on Instagram. He's everywhere. Jeffrey Deskovic is a man who spent 16 years in prison from the tender age of 17. And because he has to become the lawyer when he gets out, he has to become he created a law for prosecutorial misconduct because the government isn't doing their job, and worse, right? Worse, we'll find out the worst part. And so we have to have people like Jeffrey come out and trailblaze and protect our constitutional rights and try and save people from this very disturbing system. Now, I'm going to start with a clip. I'm not going to introduce Frank Vetro in totality yet. He's a very interesting man, very accomplished person, but I will leave you in suspense because I'm going to introduce his documentary first, which I found. I will play it at another time as a whole, but I will only take clips now only because I'm going to open up the show with it because it's entitled Whistleblowers. And I think we can all relate to what's going on in the country and what we've experienced. We can all relate to this, what it means to be a whistleblower and how the Attorney General may take on the investigation and then defend, no, not the whistleblower, but the corrupted entity that needs oversight. And then you may ask, how can that be? And why is that? Well, first, in any opportunity to change the system, first we have to understand and know the system. So let's just look at what really goes on in our government and court system. And it's been going on for years. Okay, by the way, the nursing homes isn't Cuomo's first rodeo, all right? He has a history, a long one. Okay, I'm going to share the screen. Here we go, guys. Here we go.
Yes, it is, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Jessica. If you do get the opportunity, whoever you speak with, even Annabelle, if you could let Annabelle know that, this is an issue for Governor Cuomo and no one else. It's time. No meeting. There are no meetings available with Governor Cuomo.
Stephen Cohn is the executive director of the National Whistleblower Center in Washington, D.C. He said New York is rated one of the worst states in the nation for protecting whistleblowers.
There is no uniform federal law protecting all whistleblowers. So whistleblowers have to use state laws, and they go from terrible to very strong.
Censorship, silence people, myself, I'm a whistleblower.
I never considered myself a tattletale or a snitch. Like, there's that whole negative stigma behind it. So I never even thought about it. Like, I would never do that. But I was a whistleblower.
It's not just a part of being a whistleblower or a tattletale or a rat. It's about doing the right thing. And I had a legal obligation. There was prison time for me.
What's been ingrained about you to see something, say something, go to the proper officials, go report wrongdoing is totally, honestly, I believe the opposite of what you should actually do if you uncover corruption and systemic fraud in an agency, because you'll just be eliminated. You'll be threatened, you'll be blacklisted, you'll be bankrupted, and you will be defamed.
The pattern that was involved with our stories, although different facts, but the pattern, and that's the key. That's one of the keys in government corruption. There's a pattern.
It's not documented, it didn't happen. That's their MO.
They kill you in legal fees. They devastate you financially, and you become isolated because the stories are so incredible.
In many cases, I can run the parallel between what's going on now from what I have seen for over a quarter of a century and Germany in 1935.
For them to err on the side of corruption instead of on the side of truth every fucking time almost, I just no words for it.
So that was very powerful and very true. And before we're going to get into it, I'm going to play your clip where you talk a little bit about who you are and how your life was turned upside down simply because you sought oversight over a situation that involved a minor. And maybe it would have exposed a whole slew of people, powerful people, that needed oversight. But, and by the way, it's very interesting that people use the word rat or this or that. It's kind of like, who says that? Who has that feeling? Just a mafia type of situation where you're a rat if you expose something. No one is a rat for being a whistleblower, because you're only a whistleblower because there is no meaningful oversight, which is imperative in a system of checks and balances. So that's interesting. But here we go, and then we'll get into your story after your introduction. Hold on.
My family came here from Italy so that their kids, grandkids, nephews, nieces can have the education and opportunity that they never had. And how proud were they when I decided to be a teacher? I became a science teacher, and not only a teacher, I became a leader in education at a very young age. 32, went to Hampton Bays in Eastern Long Island. I became a school principal, middle school and high school principal. They were so proud of me at what I've accomplished at a young age and what I was going to continue to accomplish. Why would I ever do anything to mess that up? I wouldn't. When I was a science teacher, Newfield High School in the mid to late 90s, I met Michelle Koenig, and we were close. Things got a little bit strange. It was around April of 2004. I went over to Michelle's house, and I noticed there was a young girl in her house. And turns out she was 16 years old, an 11th grader at Newfield High School. Michelle was her teacher. And I asked Michelle what she was doing there. I didn't know her. I asked Michelle, what is she doing there? And she said it was community service. Don't worry about it. Now, I knew as a principal, as an assistant principal. I know what community service entails. It does not entail a student going over a teacher's house to hang out. Now, I was a school administrator at the time, a mandated reporter. I'm going to just ask Newfield what they considered community service. What was this all about? And I did. And I never got a response from Newfield after I inquired. I never got any response. In February of 2005, I was at work and Michelle called me up to tell me that she was going to be on TV or something at Madison Square Garden. It's the World Series of dog shows. I left work early and I went to Madison Square Garden, and lo and behold, I saw Stephanie there, her student. And I asked Michelle, why is she here? The next day, I asked Newfield again. Once again, they didn't get back to me. No further inquiry. I figured maybe everything was okay. Hopefully, I was overreacting. I called AT&T just to get some questions about my phone bill. It seemed like it was a very high phone bill. Something wasn't right with it. And the woman on the other end said, sir, why don't you just go online and look at your phone records, just for future reference. And I told the woman I didn't have an online account. And she assured me, sir, you do have an online account. I'm looking at it right now. I actually went to the 7th Precinct in Shirley, New York. It's about a minute from my house. And the police officer at the 7th Precinct refused to take my complaint. He said, sir, it's not identity theft if no money was taken. I'm leaving work. It's around 4:30. I leave the building and it is cold winter day. Go in my car, drive through town, going home. And I hear somebody yell, get out of the car. Sirens flashing, and a few get out of their unmarked police car. And they say, Frank? And I say, yeah. They say, you're under arrest. They put me in an interrogation room. I got handcuffs on my wrist. They tried to break me down psychologically. It's going to be a rough go for you and your family. We're going to call the media, and we're going to ruin your life. That's what he said to me. And, they come over and they unshackle me. They get me off of the chain gang. I'm like, this is great. Finally, I'm going to go home. They put me in the front of the line and they recuffed me. And we exit the doors and I got the red carpet treatment in the worst way. All the media was waiting for me. I remember trying to look away so they couldn't see my face. And I looked away from the cameras. But they got me. Cameras just all over in my face. Click, 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 click. They called me, I was a terrorist. I was a predator. Stalking people. They weren't kidding when they said they were going to destroy my life and my family's. When I got home, I opened up the envelope, and the first complaint floored me. It was Michelle Koenig. I couldn't believe it. And when I started moving through the papers, her student, Stephanie, they tried to secure 50 more complaints against me over the next few months. And they just brought people out of the woodworks. They tried to get my own family members to file complaints against me. Anything to bolster their case. The New York State Education Department put a hold on my license, so I couldn't earn a dime now. And that's what they wanted. They wanted something so that I couldn't fight them anymore. And slowly, over the next year or two, I started to lose everything. Gone. Every month, I had to redefine rock bottom. Every time I thought I hit rock bottom, I would sink further. I just kept on falling. Nothing. They found nothing after what amounted to a 3-year investigation. Cleared. Go back to work. Terrific. Hampton Bays actually interviews me. Now, I wasn't supposed to be interviewed. I was supposed to just go back to work in my principal job. So I show up to these interviews with my tail between my legs, and I get questioned by people that I hired, basically sitting around a table. In the midst of all that, I discover severe racial discrimination.
Now, do you know what the process is? Like, what's the process? Well, they're going to interview on Monday and Tuesday. I've already crossed out 6 people in my mind. Another one is a dog girl.
She was one of the 6 people that was out before they even interviewed. Never had a chance.
When the nigger walks in, I think something that way. I think if a nigger person like that, he just know that nigger's running out of town.
When I tried to say something about that, I have proof of the conversations. Once again, I was just shut down, and that sunk me even further. I was basically blacklisted from every public school and anywhere. So now I'm living in my car. I couldn't end my life that way. I just became my own attorney and my own private investigator. And I discovered in the files a sworn statement given by Michelle whereby she actually admitted that she stole my identity. And she called and emailed the woman I dated. Basically everything I was arrested for, she admitted to. Well, and when I deposed him, he admitted to being in possession of something from my criminal file. Something that I claim proved his relationship with Michelle. Conveniently, Detective Wayne Heater decided that wasn't important to turn over to my defense. The county attorney, Marshall Lynch, shows up to court a year and a half later with an affidavit from Detective Heater saying it's destroyed. He had it in his possession. It says destroyed. Not only was it destroyed when he had it on him, he stole it from the file. Cover-up was well in place. How much trouble would he have gotten in if he turned it over? Everything that should have happened to her happened to me. It involves so many offices. I reached out to everybody, from local to the highest level, the governor's office. And the amount of officers involved in this cover-up, now at this point, they're just protecting themselves because of the cover-up. It's always worse than the crime. I mean, you got Middle Country School District, Hampton Bays School District, the Suffolk County Police Department, they're involved with it. The District Attorney's Office, you have the New York State Education Department. When I finally got to Commissioner Mills at the time, put somebody in charge to see what was going on, the person that was in charge of that investigation was the head of that office. There is nobody in charge of the State Education Department. Nobody. They can do whatever they want. In fact, the Attorney General defends them. You can't go to the Attorney General. Assistant Attorney General for Suffolk County actually basically yelled at me over the phone and hung up on me. When I told her kids were being abused, she said,
"I'm sorry. I wish there was something I could do for you. I looked at it from every aspect I could, and our office is not the place that can assist you. Listen, okay? I've given you your 10 minutes. I've given you much more than that. And I'm sorry that this is hard to hear, but this is the wrong place for you."
She just hung up on me. She didn't care. She didn't care. Everybody prospers. Everybody moves on in life. Except the person who did what he was mandated to do, or his consequences. And that was me, the whistleblower.
The wake up.
Oh, that was very powerful. That's your story in a nutshell. But obviously, as you said in the beginning, there's a pattern. And just to touch on, if you could, the pattern and what happens to someone who exposes corruption. And then we'll hear from Jeffrey. And some of the things you spoke about was spoliation. They will destroy the evidence, which has a lower penalty than if it's exposed. This is an old trick. This is what's been going on throughout the government now. Spoiling, destroying the evidence before it is exposed, because exposure would mean jail time. And then also, incredible, Attorney General's office said, our office is not the place. Well, what the hell are they there for? Take a look. You should have asked, did you read your oath in the office? What are you there for? And I've given you your 10 minutes. She's getting paid from your tax dollars to address this. But instead, they do the investigation and then they do the protection. So take it away, Frank, and then we'll hear from Jeffrey. And obviously, if Jeffrey has any questions, we'll go there.
Well, with regard to the pattern that you asked me about, what they do, and again, they'll do this in different ways depending on the situation, the circumstances. In my situation, what they'll do is they'll learn what you know. In my situation is when they arrested me, one of the things I did, which is a mistake, and before we even get into it, I highly recommend people, when you're in custody, don't ever talk to the police. I had this, first things first, I had this naive sense, a principle, you grow up, justice prevails, everybody always does the right thing. I figured I would just tell the truth and they'll let me go. I'd be on my way. They made a mistake. they led me down a dark road with the questioning now. Totally misled and created a story in fantasy land. So I spoke, I talked, and they wrote like bandits. And they found out everything I knew. And I found that out because years later, after my prosecution, I saw the officer's notes. And if you read the officer's notes to this day, it frustrates me because it explains everything surrounding why I was arrested. But he knew now how I was going to perhaps explain everything, and it helped him prepare his, in essence, defense against what would wind up being my attack on what they said about me. So they find out what you
Hold on a second, Frank, because you just said something, and these concepts need to be fleshed out because they're very powerful. There is a tactic that is employed, and these offices, if they are run in a corrupt manner by corrupt people, can be utilized to create an investigation, which I believe is happening with Giuliani, Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, so that one of the reasons is to gain information as to how much information you have. So if somebody was if somebody was basically a criminal running these offices, you're basically in a position where you have to comply with a criminal and give him and expose your evidence and other vulnerable people and witnesses that would basically prove your case, but you're giving it to someone who wants to destroy your case. Is that correct?
Correct. Exactly. And they use it against you and prepare themselves a pattern based on what you told them to do so. So that's step one in any cover-up. Then what they do is they tell a big lie. They make you a lunatic, somebody who's not credible, not believable, and it helps keep the world, any support you may have, away from you. They isolate and make you. For example, I was arrested on misdemeanor charges, okay, of aggravated harassment. What amounted to inappropriate. Well, what they wrote was inappropriate phone calls. Now, if you read the complaints against me, what was actually said, it wasn't even what they told the newspaper. So when people read the articles about me and watch TV, the news, that's not even what the statement said. But they tell a big lie. They said I was a terrorist. I mean, that's something that would put me on the FBI's most wanted list. They said I was a terrorist. They said I was messing around with students. My case was a misdemeanor case. My job, the Board of Ed, was my ultimate boss. They're in charge of the superintendent.
You just said another very powerful thing, another tactic. You see, there is a pattern, like you say, and there are tactics. So they basically say the most horrendous things about you that falsely get printed about you. So people will lose a desire to, get to feel for you. They will say, oh, he's getting what he deserved. Whatever happens to him, we won't even look at it because you are a pariah. And I believe that's what's being done with Giuliani by first suspending him without addressing that they're making Giuliani basically someone who is a suspended Giuliani. So he loses credibility, he loses his stature, and it's very psychological. But also, same thing with the January 6th victims, where they're not being charged for insurrection or all the things that they're printing in the paper or using against attorneys to try and say that they're terrorists and destroy attorneys' careers. But they're basically they're getting plea bargains and basically just because of the pressure of having an investigation and the fear and the cost and everything else that's involved when the system weaponizes against you, and it's not really the truth about what they're charging you with, right? So this is very serious, Frank. And Jeffrey, please intervene, but these tactics are huge. And they need to be broken down for people to really digest them. So if I said it wrong or you can elaborate, please do.
I think that was good. I definitely have some commonalities and comments and things, but I want Frank to get how did your case ultimately end? Why, what were the consequences? Why did it end? that way, and then I think it'd fit in my comments. So make more sense to the listeners.
Okay, but Frank, go start to. I left you off where they were making these horrendous statements. You are a terrorist. I mean, let's look up the definition. These horrible, defamatory, dangerous statements about you. Yeah.
Yeah. So that paves the way for the next step. With a cover up, and the steps they take is that after that big lie and you're not credible anymore, now they're going to take something vital away from you in whatever sense that may be. It could mean they locked you up, you're in jail, you're in prison, you can't make bail, and it could mean if you're in the family court system, they take your kids away. For me, that's how they set it up. If I'm a terrorist, I'm a predator towards former students and whatnot, who wants me as a principal anymore? Now they took my job away. I get fired. Now I don't have any money coming in. I have nothing. I'm a crazy man out there. It must be true. I'm isolated. I have no money. Without money, you can say whatever you want about the system, but let's face it, you're not going to be able to mount a qualified defense. Not one you want, at least. Okay. So they take something vital from you. Okay. In some sense. Then now once they do that, now you're jammed up in the system, whether you're locked behind bars, whether I was in jail for a few days and I got bailed out, but now I have no employment and now I have no money coming in. Who's going to hire me now? Right. I have no money coming in. I'm a lunatic. I'm stigmatized. And now it paves the way. It sets the stage for them to delay, adjourn, violate Brady, not turn over exculpatory information.
Hold on. Sorry, you're just saying some more tactics. Delay is a tactic. And I always said the whole thing with, I have to relate it to what's happening currently, because this is the first time, Jeffrey and Frank, I think that people can relate to what you guys and we have all witnessed, because they see it on a national level. So when you delay an investigation, it only helps the corrupt actors and it destroys lives. Just like January 6th, you don't need a committee selected by Nancy Pelosi. You need a thorough investigation at the time. You need to have the crime scene, just like Jeffrey. It was a delay of looking at his DNA that kept him in jail for 16 years. Had they looked at it from day one, he wouldn't have had a life in jail. With Frank, right? The delay only helped them to build a case against you and destroy your life further, because you couldn't get work, you were stigmatized, you had to live with it, live without money. The delay only helps corruption.
And what it does is at some point you run out of money, which happened quick, and then attorneys, let's face it, they won't work as diligently as they would like to or want to. They have bills and a life and family and whatever it is, and they're gonna go towards where they're getting paid. That's how it goes in life. So I want to touch on one of and what happens is they wear you out too. I mean, they didn't wear me out yet, but a lot of people get worn out. They give up. It happens all the time. They just lose the will, or they can't fight anymore. Thank God it didn't happen to me. I had some support, but the delays, and then next thing you know, and I want to get to what Jeffrey mentioned. He wants to let me wants me to get to why, because I pled, guys. I pled. I want to get that out there. I was accused of misdemeanors, okay? And I pled to violations. And it's a major issue, and it's something I always try to bring out because, once upon a time, there was, it has since been debunked about false confessions. Oh, nobody would do that, false confessions. And now, you're being interrogated in front of the police. You're by yourself, no attorney present. You're alone, being threatened, chained to the floor, whatever it might be. Now we've known there have been some high-profile cases. There's been a lot of them. And people, for the most part, understand, false confessions happen. It wasn't really so in the 80s and even 90s where people would buy into that. Now they do. But look at the dilemma that goes on now. I wasn't in an interrogation room. I wasn't chained to a floor. I was out of jail for 3 years while I was being prosecuted, guys. 3 years. Everybody would think, well, you're at home, you're sleeping in your own bed, you got family, you got support, you're thinking clear, you're visiting your attorney, he's giving you counsel. You step in front of a judge And you're going to tell me, after you're well nourished, you've been well schooled on the ramifications of the plea, you know everything that's going on, and now you're going to tell me you admitted to something you didn't do? Very few people buy into that. I understand on the surface why too, and usually what I just tell them is, read my book, because you'll change your mind. There is something called a forced guilty plea. They do force things on you. I mean, generally speaking, now in my case, I'll tell you why I pled guilty. Okay, so I'm going on.
Hold on a second, Frank. I'm sorry, I have to interject because I want you to understand this. It happens all the time. It happens even in traffic court. Plead to this and you can go home. You don't have to come back 10 times. Or it happens all the time. It's happening. It happened to the grandma and others on January 6th, where she's pleading to something. She had no mens rea, no intention to do anything. She's at a rally. She doesn't. There were videos of people let into the Capitol. She doesn't know even, she had nothing negative to do there. And yet they come down on her with the full force of the government, investigations, and people don't understand investigations. They get into your business, your life. They could follow you. They can come to your house. They could get your bank accounts, your emails, whatever they want. They could subpoena. They can call people that they can destroy you with just the process. It's the process that destroys. So, and leaving you for 3 years with this on your head, 3 years of your life when it could have been taken care of within the first week. And it's BS when they say they're overloaded, they're inundated, because if the offices can target and use that energy and funding for targeting and protecting, then they're obviously not working right, and there's no excuse. But at the end of the day, people plead. People plead. They have to understand this. They plead. There's movies made on it where you're not guilty, but they wear you down year after year. Think of the years, the months, the birthdays, the holidays with this laying on your head. It's like a cancer, and it's laying and eroding your life, and it festers, and you don't know how you're going to get out of it. And then you're like, and Jeffrey just had an awards dinner, Itchy, and there was a guy in jail, and he was there for many years, and he wanted to fight it. But they said, if you want to fight it, you have to stay in jail for another 2 years. And he said, or you take this plea and you can be out. And he reluctantly took the plea, and he died in 2 years. So in many ways, spiritually, he may have done the right thing because he lived the last 2 years as a free man, but with a compromised outcome that he didn't want, and he would have rather fought for it. So I'm just explaining the background and why someone like you could be innocent and take a BS plea. And the whole plea is BS in and of itself, because it says that you're doing something that you never did. Anyway, the whole plea.
It's in essence, it's what you call legal fiction. You're pleading to something you didn't even do. But what happens is you go on, and so 3 years go by, no more money. And now they're not working for me anymore. Nobody's turning over any evidence. No, the delays. I'm sinking further. Now I am going to, and this is part of the problem too, why people get sometimes forced. I can't speak for why somebody else would take a plea. Generally speaking, I would say on the surface, if you didn't do it, don't admit to it. Don't admit to it, because it's not easy to reverse that. But having said that, in my case, I wasn't in prison. I wasn't doing 25 to life. I wasn't. I had a job waiting for me, depending on the disposition of my case. So I could have just cut my 3 years loss. I had nothing. I wasn't in my car yet, but I was headed there. I couldn't even pay the $250 fine I had to pay for the violation that I pled to. My mother had to do it for me. So I took the plea. And, I still have the emails to my attorney. Like every day I would email him, let's just go to trial. Please, I'm innocent. Please. Fell on deaf ears. Next thing you know, he says to me I still have the letter, in his letter that he sent to the state ed department too, that the case was going to be sealed. Now, the legal ramifications regarding a case being sealed and not being sealed are tremendous, especially a person in my position as a principal. I was going to go back to work as a principal. So I would have went back, just picked up where I left off. So now, and I would have picked up making 140 grand a year, all the fringe benefits, the retirement, the state. I would have had everything. I figured, let me just cut my losses. I lost 3 years of my life. It's being sealed. Here it is. And that's that. Well, I'm in court and something's not going on well with the allocution, and I don't understand it. And I actually walked out of court in the middle of my allocution, where the judge is basically getting me to plead guilty, and she's going through her thing. So after I come back and they clear it all up, supposedly the judge, her last sentence to me, Judge Filiberto's last sentence to me in the transcripts was, after the plea, after it was taken, she said, now your attorney will explain the legal ramifications of the plea. And I'm looking at her like, what do you mean explain them now? I'm supposed to know all this. And not only am I supposed to know all this, Judge, but you, the prosecutor, my attorney are all supposed to be clear in open court that, yeah, it was explained to the defendant. He knows what he's doing, everything surrounding it, the ramifications. And that was never done. I thought it was done because the plea was being sealed. Okay, the case being sealed. So I never went back to work, and this is when I sink further and further. So on a hunch, I go to the courthouse, and basically the case wasn't sealed. My attorney lied to me. He lied to me on his own office letterhead, telling me the case was sealed. Still have that letter, okay? And so in my case, I took the plea because I had something to go to, something very lucrative. I mean, I would have been making $350,000 a year right now. I would have had a pension of $200,000, $250,000 a year when I retired. I had something, so I just figured, let me cut my losses. It's sealed, and basically that's it. It's all over, and that's it. And it never happened. So that's why I pled guilty. So, in hindsight, should I have? No, of course not. But I did have there was a light at the end of the tunnel for me. Okay, so that's why I pled guilty, and it was a big mistake in hindsight. But people used to say, "Why would you plead to something?" If you didn't do it, just like the stigma of having the false confession, which now people pretty much see what can happen. Guys, I'm telling you, it happens all the time. People are being forced to plead to something they didn't do.
So let me jump in here and just make a few comments in terms of what commonalities, throw some stats out there from the innocence movement / world of wrongful conviction. So firstly, there is an estimation that so first of all, 98% of all cases are actually resolved by plea bargain rather than people going to trial. There is an estimation that that in terms of the people that plead guilty, that 10% of them are innocent people that are actually pleading guilty. Bad lawyering is definitely a major cause of wrongful conviction. And certainly if you stop paying your attorney because you can't pay the attorney, as happened in Frank's case, then that attorney is suddenly going to, do a lot less work if they even keep working at all. So really at that point, by default, you're getting bad lawyering, and that's, unethical. It's unconscionable that, Frank's attorney would not have made sure that he understood exactly what was going to happen in connection with the plea deal. That's all supposed to be done ahead of time, and he's supposed to make sure that the agreement of being sealed, that the record was actually sealed. And the importance of that is because that would have that, well, if your record is sealed, then that's a benefit. Whereas if it's not sealed, then it becomes much harder to obtain gainful employment.
Well, Jeffrey, can I ask you? I know that Frank has fought this over and over again, but you say it so well, and it's so unjust, and he has a letter from the attorney, and he has the transcript where the judge is saying, "Now you'll learn about this." Shouldn't this plea be overturned for him? And
Well, it really should legally, but unfortunately, what happens most of the time is that even if you have the law and facts on your side, I mean, most of the time, appeals, post-conviction motions, they're simply rubber stamp denied. I mean, that's why, the average length of wrongful incarceration is 14 years. That's why by the time people are exonerated, it's typical that their appeals have been exhausted because the judges are not, in fact, applying the law and the facts.
Right. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why the appeals are also denied, as I wrote in my book, The Unchecked Power Guide, and we'll get into Frank's book too. But and I'll tell you why. As very clear, not from my words, but from scholars and deans and law and professors, it's intellectual dishonesty is rampant, which means false orders and judgments are rampant. And what happens at the appellate level is they don't deal with the false orders and judgment. They rely on the trial record, even if it's false. And it actually becomes a system where it perpetuates the false orders and doesn't look to seek the truth and ensure justice. And I have a clip here regarding false orders I'd like to play, but I want to hear what Frank had to say first. And I'm doing this, and I thank you for your patience, guys, because I'm trying to help people understand the system as a whole and what we're dealing with. And people can't understand that a court and a judge in a black robe and a beautiful court and the library and your honor, that they could actually create false orders and that you have no relief from the appellate division, and the media runs away with the false orders and your life is destroyed. So I do want to show that clip, and it completes the picture on this level. I'm sorry, Frank. Do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Jeffrey was saying before, and I have been for years trying to fight it, putting together 440 motions to overturn a conviction. And I think part of the problem with me.
Hold on, to explain the 440 motions, ineffective assistance of counsel, right?
Yeah, I used ineffective assistance of counsel. He lied to me. He never even requested a probable cause hearing. There was no probable cause for them to even arrest me. This was all found out through my own deposition of the police officers, things like that, and other evidence. Withheld Brady material. They had a phone trace, a successful phone trace. They never turned it over. Again, found out after the fact. Well, you get the phone. Guess whose phone it didn't lead back to, guys? Frank Vetro's. Okay, so just give me that number and we'll get to the bottom of things. And a slew of other things. Basically, withheld Brady material, ineffective counsel for the reasons we mentioned. He lied to me about the disposition of the case. So I put those motions together over the years because I kept finding out new things. So I put 3 separate motions to try to overturn the conviction. Okay, it is a conviction. It may not be a conviction to murder, but as little as it is, I mean, when you plead to a traffic violation, it's a conviction to a traffic violation. Okay, so I think part of the problem with people not giving me any even time of day regarding the motions is they're saying, wait a second, we're dealing with rapes and murders and people in prison. Who's this guy? He's out. He doesn't even have a criminal record, and this guy wants to waste our time with this. What damage could be done? There's nothing. It's a violation. Get out of here, kid. Like, we don't even want to bother with you. And the truth of the matter is, and I want to bring this to light to everybody. Well, let me just preface with this. I'm never going to compare my stuff, what I'm going through, to Jeffrey. I was never accused and wrongfully convicted of rape and murder. I never spent any time in prison, let alone 16 years. I don't want to compare it to that. However, that aside, there is damage. My life was destroyed, okay? And, I was living in my car. I worked hard to be where I was. And it doesn't matter what the conviction was to, there are collateral damages that people don't realize. You don't have to have a criminal record. Because listen, maybe if it was 1980 and I wasn't all over the internet or things like that, maybe I could have moved on. People forget that there's no more record of it, but this was 2006. There's no getting over. There's no getting past that now. Even if they sealed it, nobody knows. Even if they.
I find this so reprehensible that we have to go and explain this. I'll tell you why. You don't have to compare yourself to Jeffrey. One person's sick and they don't have their leg amputated, but another person can't walk and they hobble. It doesn't matter what the injustice is. It matters that the process that you had was unjust and has to be fixed. It doesn't matter that somebody else has suffered more or has more of a consequence. And I don't go by that 1980. There are people in 1980 that had false convictions. It was published in papers. Their lives were destroyed. Listen, injustice, false orders destroy lives. It's the process. So I don't go for that. There's not even an argument that that should even take place. So I want to, yeah, go ahead.
It shouldn't. I 100% agree. Unfortunately, the general population, a lot of them have to, we have to say that to some of them. That's part of the challenge. I agree 100% with you.
No, we have to say that the process is very important. I mean, somebody's going to say they lost their life savings. Somebody lost a child. I mean, you can't. Nobody wants to lose. They'd give up their life savings not to lose a child, but then you're taking the focus away of the perpetrator and the system. The consequence is irrelevant. The level of suffering in the consequence is irrelevant, but it's substantial to the individual. It's the people who are in positions of power and funding and the process and the obstruction of justice and the abuse of process and power. That's what is the focus. And when they do say that to you, you have to bring them back to the fact that what happened to you destroys life. Let me play this clip, and I think it will highlight what we're saying, because these are the type of arguments that make me very upset.
Things that we can experience in a courthouse. Every order is a powerful blank canvas. False orders and judgments can easily be created and continue for years. By placing politicians on the bench, decisions become unpredictable and the outcomes can be chaotic and, I believe, dangerous. So what is a false order? When a judge creates rulings that knowingly fabricate, obliterate, and distort the facts and/or controlling law of a case. As Monroe Friedman has said, frankly, I've had more than enough of judicial opinions that bear no relationship whatsoever to the cases that have been filed and argued before the judges. I'm talking about judicial opinions that falsify the facts of the cases that have been argued, judicial opinions that make disingenuous use or omission of material authorities, judicial opinions that cover up these things with no publication and no citation rules. What's the foundation of false order is intellectual dishonesty. Professor Anthony D'Amato. What kind of a judiciary system has this society produced where judges can misstate the facts of a case and then proceed to apply the law to those fictitious facts? Can anybody be safe in this court if this practice is allowed to continue? If judges can listen to the evidence and then tell a contrary story, what remains of justice? The vaunted security that we have in a free country and a just legal system turns to quicksand. False orders can protect criminal misconduct, even in the face of overwhelming verifiable evidence, even in the face of admissions, even in the face of a dead body in the trunk. Okay? False orders can erase evidence, events, and facts. False orders can create new facts, new evidence, and even transform people into monsters. False orders can extort funds, creating sudden, unwarranted wealth and/or indebtedness. False orders can destroy children, families, the elderly, individuals, and businesses. False orders take on a life of their own. False orders can put innocent people in jail. Well,
so I wanted to say something else on what you said, and then you could comment, please, Jeffrey. When you say that they're going to determine what cases are important, where they're trying to make January 6th worse than 9/11. They can make anything with false orders, with false narratives, with false media. They could change everything. We have to keep our eye on the process and on the system and address this. And by the way, these professors I quoted, Monroe Friedman was a dean, and he lectured in Harvard, and there are so many. And they said that they would have more faith in the system if the judges would actually address the false orders, the rampant false orders that are destroying lives.
Yeah, so I just want to add, that like in my case, for example, I mean, the judicial opinion really had no relationship to the facts. The judges wrote that there was overwhelming evidence of guilt, even though all they had was this coerced confession obtained under highly questionable circumstances, with the DNA test, excluding me. And when you look at the summaries of cases in the National Registry of Exonerations or on the Innocence Project's website, which all have ended in exoneration, we see that there are plenty of red flags along the way where the case, should have been stopped, either at the trial level or even at the appeal level. Plenty of red flags that a confession was false, or that an identification was not reliable, that it was obtained under highly suggestible conditions, or that an informant was lying, and yet it was all allowed to go on.
One of the things along these lines, I want to enforce everybody that there are procedures, obviously, in court, and so many times they're just not followed. Like, if they just followed the court procedure, and things would go a little bit better. But one of the problems with that is they'll follow procedure when it benefits them and not follow when it benefits them. And, right in front of us, Jeffrey is an example. Correct me if I'm wrong. One of Jeffrey's appeals was denied because his attorney, while Jeffrey's in prison, his attorney's is misinformed by the clerk by a clerk about a deadline a few days late with the motion, and it's denied for that. Now, forget the truth, forget the facts, forget that somebody's in prison for the wrong things. You're a couple of days late, and even though it's not even your fault, we got to stick to the rules here. It's late. So
by the way, if the court is run corruptly and the judge wants a certain outcome, and if the judge was abusive, they could direct misinformation very easily.
They could always use their own discretion too. People say, we have the best system. I'm not going to disagree with that. But my response to that a lot is, okay, fine, it's the best system in the world. Okay, let's just take it. Okay, it's the best.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You just said something, and I'm so tired of hearing this.
Me too.
No, hold on, because we have a system that, if it was run correctly, is the best system in the world. If a body is healthy, it's the best body in the world. If you have a liver that's decaying, if you have a building that has a bad foundation, it's going to fall apart. Okay, so the system, if they're run by corrupt or abusive or politically, it's going to be destroyed, and people won't have any faith in that system. And by the way, I want to finish with, if you have a system that's running that way, it becomes the most dangerous weapon, the most dangerous vehicle, the most dangerous operation to enable corruption and criminal networks.
Along those lines, when people say that to me, I say, well, if you line up 10 pieces of crap and you pick the one that smells the least, it's still a piece of crap. We still need to fix it. But my response to fixing it is, well, the people that are in power, there's nothing to fix. It's running exactly the way they want it. It's not broken. This is how they want it to run, guys. So, we need a lot of, it may be the best, but there's so much work to do. So much, for sure.
No, we just need to have meaningful oversight. We have all the laws. Listen, look at what Jeffrey just did. We have the Office of Professional Responsibility, okay? They are supposed to discipline prosecutorial misconduct. I had Mr. Hoffman on, Thomas Hoffman, who's an attorney who helped exonerate people. He says when a prosecutor withholds information, Brady violations, they do it intentionally. When a judge acts a certain way, it's done intentionally. This office is operating. It's funded, it's empowered, it's the most important office. You know why it's the most important office? Because they have power to investigate and refer to criminality judges, lawyers, anybody with a law degree, governors, attorney generals, district attorneys. If that office is run in a criminal matter, then that's very easy to do. All you have to do is place people in positions of power within that office. And by the way, there were Senate hearings where people within that office exposed it. So, but what happened there, just like with what happened in your whistleblower documentary, the AG, I believe it was Cuomo at the time, he investigated and then defended not the whistleblowers, not the people, not the victims that it's supposed to serve, but he protected and defended the office. So look at that conflict of interest. And it's a pattern. It's part of your pattern, Frank. But here's the deal. This office didn't deal with the prosecutors, like prosecutorial misconduct in Jeffrey Deskovic's case, or Weissman that Sidney Powell talks about, or Roderick Johnson. And not only that, but people say they protect crimes and misconduct. Well, we don't know because there's no meaningful oversight. But also at the same time, people say they are weaponized against Giuliani and Sidney Powell and others to create investigations and use the power to automatically suspend it, to silence whistleblowers regarding the election and how the government's working. So if this office is operating like that, and without meaningful oversight and without investigations into that office, no one can say it's not, because there's evidence that there is, and very serious concern. So at the end of the day, they either need to be removed, these offices that are not doing its job, and worse, because if they are run like that, if they're truly run like that, they will destroy our entire court system, and they could enable any network of crime. So your lawyer, if you went to the disciplinary committee, didn't you? Right? So, and nothing happened, even though you say he lied to you. And all the consequences that befell you is egregious misconduct by an attorney, but nothing happened. Jeffrey Deskovic. So Jeffrey has to come out, as I said in the beginning, become a lawyer after spending 16 years in jail, and create a bill and now a law to address prosecutorial misconduct that we have an office that's funded and empowered to do.
Excuse me. Yeah, it's a, when you talk about attorneys, and you mentioned whistleblowers also. There's a man, a friend of mine named Jeffrey Mansour. He was a whistleblower, and he actually won his case against the state. He won his case. This is another way they silence whistleblowers, though. He won, and he racked up $900,000 in attorney's fees. His attorneys going to be paid $900,000. So after he won his case, he was getting the money. He's getting a lot of money for his attorneys, everything. The judge, I don't even know how they get away with this or how it was allowed to happen, but the judge cut the attorney's fees. His attorneys only got $11,000 for so many years' work, multiple attorneys. So now you're telling me the one guy who actually won in New York as a whistleblower got awarded $1 and $11,000 in attorney's fees. Now, what attorney is going to take the next whistleblower case where they know they have to work multiple years and they're going to get $11,000?
I'm so happy you pointed that out, because there's many ways to target.
Yes.
And you could target, and there were people at the Senate hearings in New York that said they won their personal injury case, but then the appellate judge nixed it. So if a judge is engaging in misconduct and there's no oversight, whatever happens at trial, baby, could be knocked out by a judge, can be knocked out by the appellate division, and you have no oversight and redress. So there are, they say there's 300 ways to say a mouse is kosher. There's any way you can to rationalize. And there's a million ways. What did Schumer say? There's 7 days from Sunday or 6 days from Sunday that the intelligence community can get back at you. And they said, there were articles that I say in my book where the chief judge in New York said lawyers feared him because he knew how to punish with the administrative machinery. So there are many, many ways to get you. If there's if there's people if there's no oversight and there's compromised people in the government, which is very easy to do.
I think one of the many things, as we're discussing, one of the issues, and Jeffrey does a lot to help turn this around, is that they are organized, and the general population, we generally speaking, are not. And Jeffrey's doing his part for sure to gather the troops and organize people and educate them. And a lot more of that has to be done because we're not organized and they are.
Right, that's the whole theory of having the It Could Happen to You coalition, which Legal Minutes covered our awards, and Bill Bastick founded it and using his organizing skills and coalition building skills and building a statewide coalition, and that way they're, like you said, the other side is organized, and by having as big a coalition as you can and non-traditional partners, and really everyone has a stake in this because people. Like we had labor, we had teachers unions, people in the hotel and restaurant industry, because their members could be impacted by all of this too. And even with that, it was still an 8-year fight in order to get independent oversight for prosecutors. So I guess my point is, working in coalition is definitely the key. But even with that, it's still very difficult.
Well, even with your the law, it still has to be funded and enforced, right? So that's another way that they can get you to say, okay, Jeffrey, it took you 8 years. Look how hard it is to pursue justice. 8 years of your life just to get a bill into law, and then the law has to be funded and applied.
Right, the bill has to be funded, and we need to get the commissioners appointed, and then get started. So there are those other 2 steps as well. Yeah, you're right. Look, the system is very resistant to change.
Well, first of all, I don't agree that they are organized. They have the power and the funding, and we're allowing we're allowing them to proceed like this. We could demand that right now, what's going on with January 6th and with Sydney and Giuliani, we can get behind these cases and say, let's expose this. Jeffrey Deskovic, why the hell did he have to come out, spend 8 years of his life after 16 years in prison to make a bill into a law that still needs to be funded and applied when we have an office? And now at the same time, people are saying that the office is weaponized. But here, it's not about being organized. It's like this. And look, just for a lack of better comparison, because it just will help you understand. I followed the Sandusky case. I represented people of child sexual abuse. Listen, when a pedophile wants access to a child, they go into Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. They go into charities that deal with troubled kids. They make sure that they get access and they look credible so nobody will look at them. They're like, oh, you're very good. Look, you have a charity or you're helping. And then they get access to these vulnerable, beautiful children. So it's the same thing. If you had a criminal network, remember, it's billions of dollars of funding in a court system and government. There are so much incentive, even in individual cases. How much would somebody pay someone to, get to become free, or to protect their legal fees, or to protect their children, or punish somebody that they don't like, or destroy another attorney, or whatever? There's so many different incentives. So if you know that, you want somebody compromised in the ethics office, because when the whistleblower targeting, what's that worth?
Right. Well, in terms of the issue of organizing, clearly, people work together. Just on a wrongful conviction case, is the police, then working with the prosecutors, the judges with the silent collusion, and trying to get legislation passed, and people who don't want the oversight, making phone calls and arm twisting as amongst the elected officials. So they definitely work together for sure. But it's not but it's definitely not impossible to overcome, but it is difficult.
Well, I would like to play 2 short clips, and then I just want to hear your professional opinion, Jeffrey, regarding the system, and Frank, and you guys can conclude with that. Is there anything you want to say before I do? Because I think what you've gone through and what you do is so important, that if we truly understand the system as a whole and all the aspects and the tactics and the pattern, that's how we can address it. So before I play these 2 clips regarding our court system and why we can't break through the way it is right now, is there anything that you guys want to say? You'll obviously have the floor afterwards. So
I'll wait till after.
Okay.
I'll let Jeffrey close it out afterwards. But one of the things I want to say is, a lot of people just think that nothing will affect them. I thought it. I'm not trying to insult anybody. I thought that 16 years ago. Who gets accused of such a sensational crime of rape and murder? Very few people anyway. Just listen, guys. Anybody out there ever get into an argument with your significant other? Because I can tell you right now, 100% fact, the only reason I was arrested was because I had a falling out with my ex. That's it. That's what, and listen, I'm going to trial in the fall and it's going to come out. That's why I was arrested. So they ruined my life for that. And it doesn't have to be murder that affects you. Okay. They could get you for anything. It happened to me and I'm not the only one. I was naive to think that I was an isolated story. What a fool I was. Okay. It can happen. Here we go. Ready, Jeff? It could happen to you. It could happen
to you.
It doesn't have to be murder. It doesn't have to be. It could be anything.
You just said something so powerful, Frank, because in the system, if you have a mentally, emotionally ill people or somebody, and I call somebody who just wants to litigate and ruin another person's life or make false charges, I call them mentally, emotionally ill. The court could stop it. And they couldn't get away with it. But by allowing it, you can create legal fees. You can torture the other person. There's a lot of benefits if you're not an honest person sitting there. So just like with the riots, when our politicians encourage riots, they're encouraging the mentally and emotionally ill amongst us, who, when we do show your whole documentary, will show how the state of the disabled offices and the state of mental health offices, there's no help for these people, no meaningful help for these people. Yet they are utilized to create riots or encouraged to allow their litigation to fester or hurt someone else. Is that not true? In your opinion?
Yeah, it's definitely true. Sure.
I agree with that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so here I'm going to show 2 of these slides, and it never gets old. It's like a soap opera because nothing ever gets fixed. So these slides are relevant as today as they were yesterday, and I'm going to do one after the other. Bear with me, and then you guys can close it out.
Guys, before I go to the next slide, what's the most important aspect of our government? Anybody? What's the most important aspect that we have that keeps us confident? What? Yes, you are brilliant. Checks and balances. So this is the most important aspect we can have. 3 separate functioning independent branches of government to act as checks and balances on one another. But in a politicized court system, these 3 branches are no longer independent. They are beholden to the political machine. What does that mean? That means the machine, where attorneys and where special interest groups and where businesses, that they are funding this machine to ensure their candidates are in office. The governors, the attorney generals, the DAs, the assemblymen, the judges, they're all part of the same machine. So do you think there's any oversight or accountability in that machine? Are there any separations of powers? Are they all part of one unit, advancing careers? Tell me, what do you think? Okay, so now lawyers, businesses, and special interest groups are the primary contributors. They provide large sums of money. They may host extravagant fundraisers just to get these governors into office. The governors, they owe their careers to these contributors, and they will turn around when they get into office and they will appoint the most powerful judges. They will appoint lower level judges, but they will appoint the most powerful judges. And these contributors, the lawyers, the special interest groups, and the businesses may very well come before these judges on multi-million and even billion-dollar cases, okay? So if these appointed judges, that if they put judges in the office and the judges abuse their power, do you think they have any responsibility? They don't. Nobody goes back to Governor Christie and says, how can you put this judge in the office? The judge can abuse his power, can engage in criminal activity, and none of these governors will be responsible for the choices they made and who they put on the bench. So, unfortunately, the only people who suffer is the public. A year job. Partisan judicial elections are by far the most expensive. Lawyers and business interests account for at least 49% of all contributions. Public confidence. 76% of voters and 26% of state judges believe that campaign contributions influence judicial decisions. You guys are not alone. Two systems of justice. 62% of voters, including nearly 90% of African American voters, feel that there are two systems of justice. Justice versus just us. Let's take a look at some of the potential consequences of a political judiciary. Here we go. This is the chief judge. We may create a concentration of enormous power and funding in the hands of a few politically entrenched, or at least very vulnerable individuals. To become a chief judge, all you need to do is get appointed by the governor. He may hardly have practiced as a lawyer, hardly have been a judge, yet he can be appointed chief judge of the entire court system. And he can be placed in a position where he oversees a budget of billions of dollars. The chief judge enjoys extraordinary power without any interference, regardless of how dysfunctional or even dangerous the court system under his administration may be. Now, no matter how wonderful you think this man is, no one deserves this much power and this much control over the court system and its multi-billion-dollar funding. Nobody. This creates a political court system that becomes an impenetrable vacuum of enormous power and funding. It's like that song says, you can check in anytime you like, but you may never leave because you are stuck within this vacuum. And this chief judge, the governor puts the chief judge in. He could put the Court of Appeals judge in. The presiding judge, governor could put him in. The chief judge can appoint the administrative judge, a few, and the judges underneath them. And then you have the trial courts. And so it's, and then you have the inspector general. And you can have the commission on judicial conduct. You have a problem with the judge? Go to the commission on judicial conduct. Don't worry, you'll be heard. You have a problem with integrity in the court? Go to the inspector general. You need a law guardian? Right there. And mental health professionals here. Attorney discipline. It's all right here. One-stop shop forms are necessary.
Okay, guys. So let's conclude on that. If you felt that was insightful, and tell people if there's a GoFundMe, what you're doing now, Frank and Jeffrey, and conclude on what you just saw, if you don't mind.
I'll let Jeffrey close it out. But one statement I'd like to make is regarding what we just heard and saw. I say this a lot. A lot of times, not a blanket statement, but often, people that are controlling our lives and are in positions of power are not there on their merits. Okay, they're there because they were put there. They're part of a good old voice network, part of the system, and so don't be impressed or intimidated by any person's ability necessarily. Okay, on the surface, there may be quality there, but a lot of times they're not on their merits. So I just like to say that in my closing. And as far as you can reach me. The easiest way to reach anybody that can reach me or find out updates about me is just go to my website, frankvetro, VETRO.com. Tells you everything about me, updates on my court trial when it's coming, the documentary. I wrote a book called Standing on Principle, PAL, Principle. You can find out about the book. It's one-stop shopping. Anything about me, you could just go to frankvetro, VETRO.com. Thank you.
Yeah, so I do want to point out that just like your chart had, Susan, just the way that everything is entrenched and, not enough independence and, too much influence, influence peddling is definitely all part of the problem. So I do like the way that you broke that out in those slides in a very easy to understand way, which obviously your audience was was able to follow in person. I think the people here today will be able to do that as well. Look, people can find me on, I have a public figure page on Facebook. There's the website, www.deskovic.org. I have a public figure page on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. You know, we need more people voting. We need to vote people in that are for justice reform and to vote people out, regardless of political party. We need more people to serve on juries. Too many of us get out of jury duty, and so the people that are left really don't scrutinize the prosecutor's case. And we all do have a stake in this. You know, it is of the people, by the people, for the people. But you know, too many of us can't really be bothered beyond our individual lives to get involved. So learn more and continue to support programs like this, and contact your elected officials with regards to criminal justice reform, you know, legislation. Because despite all this, everything that we've talked about, we are definitely not in a hopeless situation. I mean, we did pass the bill, and we are working on other legislations gotten passed previously, and we are working on other things. But we do need everybody on deck. You know, it's not free to do this work. You know, my foundation, we have been able to free 11 people. We helped pass the 3 laws, and then in coalition an additional 5. But there's a lot of hidden costs that are, you know, associated with that. So, you know, if politicians of either party can raise tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars with what they refer to as low dollar donors, then why can we not, you know, support criminal justice reform work? There is a website called on the Patreon website. Just put Patreon and Deskovic. What if we have, you know, what if there were 25,000 people? What if there were $100,000 people that were, you know, were willing to sacrifice just $3 a month, $5 a month? Who's going to miss that? But if many people are doing that, that would give a really nice budget. Because if we could get this type of work done on a shoestring budget, imagine if we were definitely armed for bear. And we need to get more ethical people manning positions. We need more ethical people running for offices.
Very well said. Thank you for all that you do. Frank, you may want to start a GoFundMe if you didn't already. And Jeffrey, I hope that people go to your organization. It is definitely, you are an amazing person who came out, became a lawyer, started this, and helped exonerate over 11 people, and you're still fighting the fight, and use a lot of your own resources to do that. So God bless. Thank you guys so much for being here, and let's keep this conversation going and do good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best. Have a great day, guys.